Hello everyone and welcome to the Kiki London YouTube channel. My name's Amanda and in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be comparing tips and sculpting with the Kiki London Easy Build Up Gel. So I really hope you all enjoy watching. Now for this video I'm going to be working on two of my own nails. I have already done a majority of the natural nail prep. If you want to see a dedicated prep video I will leave one linked in the description box below, so do check that out. So for the sculpting, we're going to be using the Kiki London Sculpting Forms, and for the tips, I've just grabbed one out of my collection of many tips. So I'm going to start off by cleansing the natural nail plate using one of the Kiki London alcohol pads. So I'm just doing this to make sure that the nails are sanitized, just like you would when you're working on a client. And then I'm going to come in and apply my tip. So to apply my tips, I like to apply the tiniest amount of glue. You really don't want to apply loads of glue because otherwise it takes a lot longer to stick. And I only apply that glue to the very edge of the tip, and I only apply the tip to the very edge of my free edge. You really don't want to be taking your tip too far down on the natural nail plate. It's only there to help extend the length of the nail, so we're not adding any structure or strength with our nail tips. Then I'm just pressing it down firmly in the center of the nail, and once that glue has begun to dry I release it and then I just pinch down the sides of the tip. Some tips you'll find the wings of the tip seem to spring up a little bit, so I like to just make sure they get a good squeeze just to make sure they have applied nicely. And as you can see, that tip fits nicely from side to side. We've got no excess overhang and it's not too short either. So when you are sizing up your tips, you want to make sure that your tip fits from side to side of your natural nail. It's always better to go a little bit bigger than a little bit smaller because you can tailor a too big tip to fit. Then you can trim your tip down using either tip cutters or straight edge nail clippers like I have done there. Now I want the shape of my nail to be a pointed almond, kind of like a mini stiletto shape. So I'm going to take the Kiki London file and file my tip into shape. I personally usually use the 180 grit side of the file to file my tip into shape. I find it works a lot better than using the 100 grit side. You will find that a lot of tips are quite thin, so they file quite quickly, so the 180 grit side of the file is sufficient. So as I said, I wanted to compare tips to sculpting. So one of the first things that you kind of compare between tips and sculpting is you have to do double filing when it comes to applying tips. So you've got to file before applying any product. So like we are here, we're having to file that tip into shape, and then you also have to file to remove or buff the surface of the tip to remove any shine before applying any gel products. And at times, depending on the tips you're using, you do have to blend them in to the natural nail. Where you don't have that much filing to do when you are sculpting, you only have your finished filing to do. But of course with sculpting you do have to spend a little bit of time applying your sculpting forms. Let me know in the comments below, by the way, what is your preference? Is it tips or sculpting, and why do you prefer that method? So once I had finished filing that tip into shape, I'm just removing some of the dust just so I can clearly see that I'm happy with the shape. I do find it easier to try and get a majority of the shape done before applying my products, just because then it's a little bit easier because you haven't got too much finished filing to do. After we've filed the tip into shape, I'm going to use the 180 grit side of the file again just to remove the shine from the tip. Gel products don't like to stick to a shiny surface, so you need to buff away the shine, and I kind of blend this into the natural nail a little bit. I'm not running the file over my natural nail, I'm just thinning out the area of the tip where it meets the natural nail. And also with tips, when you're filing them, you will find that you get these little thin areas underneath. So you do need to make sure you remove those bits of tip. You'll know what I mean. They kind of like flick up, and it's where you filed the tip but it hasn't fully removed it. So always make sure you remove any of that excess tip from underneath as well. And then once again, you want to make sure you're always scrubbing off any dust when you are doing your filing so that it's not building up on the natural nail plate. So once I had brushed away all of the dust, I'm going to also take the Kiki London alcohol pad again, just to really cleanse and remove that dust, because we don't want any getting stuck into our gel products. So this is what the nail looks like now we've got our tip applied. So now we've done the tips, this is when you would come in and do your primer. So personally, for me, I apply my primer after I've applied my tips, and then you can, when it comes to sculpting, you can do it before or after you're doing your sculpting forms. Usually if I was putting sculpting forms on all of my nails, I would prime after, just in case I touch any of them or when I'm applying the next sculpting form. Then once you have primed, you would come in and apply your rubber base coat or your base coat, depending on what you're using. Whenever I'm working with the easy build up set system, I opt to use the rubber base coat, and today I'm going to use one of the coloured ones. It doesn't necessarily matter what rubber base color you put underneath, because if you're using one of the colored easy build up gels, you're not really going to see this color anyway. But I opted for a nice natural peachy pink color here. I think this was number 3, but I'll double check and leave it in the description box below. So when I'm applying the rubber base coat to the nail with the tips, I don't worry about covering the entire tip with it, because the base coat is mainly for your natural nail plate. So I'm just making sure to get as close and as neat around that cuticle area, and then I just blend it down slightly at the tip area. I do like to make sure it touches that tip area, because it helps that line blend together where your tip has met your natural nail plate. And then on the nail where we're going to be sculpting, I would come in and apply the base coat just the same as I would when we're working on a natural nail. With the sculpted nails, when you're doing a full set, you could pop all your sculpting forms on first of all and then do your primer and your base coat, or you could do your primer and base coat first and then apply your sculpting forms. That is really down to personal preference in my opinion. I kind of do find it easier though to do all of the primer first and then all of the base coat first and then apply my sculpting forms. So here I have one of the Kiki London sculpting forms. Now I love these sculpting forms. They have a nice thickness to them, so they're strong and sturdy, but they're not too thick, so you're able to really mold them into shape to get a nice C curve. So that's exactly what I was doing there. I was just running that sculpting form between my two thumbs to put a bit of a curve down that area where you've got the black and gold grid. This helps you create a nice C curve. Now I was doing a fairly short to medium length natural nail here, so I didn't want to put a too deep C curve in it, but if you want a deeper C curve, you can roll it a little bit more and then pinch it a little bit more when you are closing it, because that's what's creating that C curve for the nail. The curve that you create with your sculpting form is going to be replicated when you put your builder gel over the top. So what I'm doing to begin with is making sure that's nice and flush under my natural nail plate, getting it down as you want to make sure there's no gap between your natural nail and the sculpting form. So I'm making sure that's pushed flush underneath the natural nail. I do find that whenever I'm sculpting, I find it a lot easier if I've trimmed the natural nail down to a shorter length rather than trying to fit the sculpting form under a longer length nail. Then I'm just popping 2 little slits in the side here, just because my natural nails they've curved down quite a lot. I don't know how to explain it. My free edge seems to curve down quite a lot. So you do have to tailor the form sometimes depending on your client, just to make sure that you get a good fit. And as you see, I close up the tabs on the back of the form and pinch it closed at the bottom to make sure that that has fitted nicely to your finger and nail. We're then ready to come in with the Kiki London Easy Build Up Gel. So I'm using a soft peach here. It's a really nice natural nude peach tone gel. Now to begin with, I'm going to be working on the sculpted nail. So I'm going to come in and apply a thin layer to all of the natural nail plate. Now I did hit my cuticle area here, so you will see I come in with the angled nail art brush and a little bit of alcohol just to make sure I remove that product from the skin before curing. Now that I've got a thin wet layer of gel down on the natural nail, I pick up a kind of medium size amount onto my brush, and then what I'm doing with this is building up the extension. So I connect my brush with that gel that we've already applied on the natural nail plate, and then I'm bringing that down and sculpting out the length and shape of the nail that we're going to create. So as you can see, I'm pulling down on to the gel that's on that natural nail plate and then using the gel that's on the brush to create that shape. You want to connect it nicely to the gel that you've already applied on your natural nail plate, because this is going to ensure you don't get any snappages. A lot of the time, if you don't do this, this is where the nail will snap. It will snap where that extension meets the natural nail plate. So you want to make sure down at these side walls here, which is like your stress point, that your gel has connected nicely to that natural nail and the free edge, that there's no gap between the natural nail and the extension, and that there's enough product there, enough strength and structure, and enough thickness. Now, once I have got this first layer applied, I do squeeze or pinch the tip of my form. This is going to help put that C curve in there and make sure that it's nicely closed on the form, so we're going to get that nice C curved shape. I then cured that first layer of gel, and as you can see, it's built up a lot of the strength and structure, but I did want a little bit more of an apex, one, due to the length of the nail, and two, due to wanting to make sure that this extension is going to last for however long your client is wearing it. A lot of the time clients will go 2 to 3 weeks with these extensions. So what I'm going to do for my second layer of gel is I'm going to come in and apply a thin wet layer. So this is your slip layer. So I'm applying a really thin layer, getting a nice neat cuticle area with my brush, letting that brush fan out to do a lot of the work for me. Again, if you do touch your skin or cuticles, make sure to clean off that product before curing. And then whilst that slip layer is still wet, I'm picking up a ball of gel on my brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this down in the apex area. I'm leaving a lot of the product there. I'm pushing it up where it needs to be, but I don't have to go all the way up to that cuticle area because we've applied our product nice and thin there, and we don't need to build up too much thickness at the cuticle area. So I just push it up and then I'm walking it down to the nail. Like I said, I've left a lot of that product in that apex area in the back third because that's where I want a lot of my strength and structure. And then I'm just making sure to build up the thickness of the tip. Because we don't have a tip applied like on the ring finger, we need to make sure we build up all the strength and structure with our builder gel. So the tip, when you're doing tips, they don't actually apply any strength to the nail. They kind of just give you a platform to work on top of. But when you're sculpting, you need to make sure you're building up that platform and the thickness for the free edge. Once I'm happy with the gel application, I do hold the nail upside down for a few seconds just to pull that product into the center of the nail, as this helps build up the spine of the nail. And as you can see here, it has built up a nice apex. We've got that slightly higher thickness in the apex area, and then it tapers down to the very free edge of the nail. So we're now ready to work on the nail where we've got the tip. So with this, I'm going to come in first of all and apply that slip layer of gel. So this is a thin layer of gel, and it's going to cover the entire natural nail plate and the tip of the nail. So with this layer, you want to make sure that you're getting a nice neat cuticle area and getting nice and neat around those sidewalls. Now, I always like to clean off any product that does touch the skin or the cuticles before I come in with my thicker layer of gel. Otherwise, basically what happens is with your slip layer, it's going to help your thicker layer follow where it needs to go. So if you end up getting any of the slip layer on your skin or cuticles, your thicker layer is going to follow. So always clean up around the cuticle and sidewall area if you need to before coming in with that thicker layer of gel. Then with my ball of gel, I'm just going to work it down the nail until our entire nail is covered. I do find the application is very similar when you are working on tips to sculpt. However, I find the overall appearance looks a lot better on sculpting, especially when it comes to the lower arches. When I had my nail tilted at the side there, you will see with tips sometimes you can't perfect your lower arches as well as you can with sculpting. And also I find with tips, even some of the C-curved tips don't give as nice C curve as what you can create with sculpting forms. So I do prefer the overall look of sculpting forms, in all honesty. Personally, for me, I feel as though sculpting is a little bit harder, but it's worth it because it gives off a better appearance, in my opinion. So back to the application, I did feel as though my apex was looking a bit thin on that area on the tip nail. So I'm going to come in and apply a thin slip layer again, and then pick up a ball of gel and build up that apex area. On both nails, you want to make sure that you have built up your apex and you've got enough strength and structure. Your sculpting and your tip is more, it doesn't matter which one you use, basically you still need to make sure you're building up your strength and structure. But I do find when you're sculpting, you build up some of your strength and structure with your C curve as well. So if you have a C curve that matches the natural nail plate, it's going to naturally be adding a little bit of strength in there as well. So sometimes with sculpted nails, I find you can get away with doing them a little bit thinner than what you can with tipped nails, and then they're still going to be as strong, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to removing your sculpting foam, you want to make sure you pinch it and it will separate from the builder gel. And then you always want to pull it downwards away from your extension. That way you're not putting any stress on the extension or on the natural nail plate. They do come off nice and easily. And then once you have removed your sculpting form, or if you're working with tips, once you've finished curing, you want to come in and use one of the Kiki London alcohol pads to remove that tacky inhibition layer before filing. And now that's what we're jumping to, the filing. Now, I don't find there's too much difference in the filing between sculpted nails and tipped nails. I use the same filing routine. So I'm just going to show you guys a filing on the sculpted nail. In this instance, I did find the sculpted nail easier to file actually, because I was happier with the overall shape that I'd created on this sculpting form compared to the nail where I'd applied the tips. And I feel as though this is one of the things as well that's my personal preference with sculpting forms. You've got the freedom to create your shape a lot easier than with tips. So for example, if you pop on square tips but want a stiletto or a rounded almond nail or a round nail, you have a lot of filing with your tip to do to perfect the shape. Where with sculpting, your sculpting form, you're going to use the same sculpting form regardless of what shape you're creating. So then you're able to create your shape with your gel, and the more you practice your gel application with sculpting, the easier it is to create the shape with the gel, and then you have minimal filing to do anyway. But for the filing, I come in and I neaten up the shape using the 100 or 180 grit side of the file. I do find the Kiki London Easy Build Up Gel files really easy, so a lot of the time I do only use the 180 grit side of the file, but I do want a nice sharp shape, so that's what I like to use the 100 grit side of the file for. Once I'm happy with the shape of the nail, I just go over the surface of the nail. Now here you want to be really careful. You don't want to file down too much of your product. You just want to make sure everything's nice and consistent throughout the nail and nice and smooth. You've not got no lumps or bumps or anything like that. Again, the more you practice your application, the less filing you have to do. So you'll see here, I just think the sculpting form, the lower arches come out a lot nicer. The shape looks a lot nicer than the tipped nail. Overall, I think the appearance just looked a lot better than the tipped nail. So once I'd finished filing, I'm going to come in and buff. We're only going to do a light buff because we want our top coat to still adhere to the nails. So we don't want to over buff, but I do like to give the nails a good buff because it helps get out any of the scratches from your filing. And then we're going to give the nails a really good scrub. You want to make sure that you're scrubbing under and around the nails, around the cuticle area, to remove all of that dust. Once I've finished scrubbing, I do like to go over them with an alcohol pad. You want to make sure you remove all of that dust. If you file, you will know that it leaves a lot of dust. And if you don't remove all of this, it does end up sticking into your top coat, which ruins the overall appearance of the nails. So make sure to give the nails a really good clean before you come in and top coat. And then for top coat, we're using the Kiki London No Wipe top coat. So I'm just going to apply a thin layer of this to all of the nails. Now, I loved comparing these two. I haven't done a side-by-side tipped and sculpted nail in a really long time. Majority of the time when I do the easy build-up gel on myself, I will opt to sculpt because I feel as though it gives an overall much nicer appearance. But this is down to personal preference, and tips are just as good as sculpting. So I definitely would recommend, if you are a beginner, having a play around with both ways and finding out which one you prefer. And then obviously it's always good to have both of techniques. It's always good, sorry, to know both of the techniques, because you will find that some clients you need to use tips on and some clients it's a lot easier to sculpt on. I find if I'm working on a client with bitten nails, sculpting is a lot easier to do than applying tips. Anyway, we are now at the end of the video. I did just apply a little bit of cuticle oil to refreshen and nourish my cuticles. Look at the shine from the no wipe top coat. It's absolutely amazing, and I really love this color of the Easy Build Up Gel. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up and leave us a comment below. And if you haven't already subscribed, I would absolutely love it if you hit that subscription button. Thank you all so much for watching. Lots of love. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.